Here we go again. Donald Trump is now the 47th president of the United States. The aftermath of the 2024 election played out similarly to the 2016 election. Just like in 2016, the excuses and quick fix explanations immediately took hold to try to explain the outcome. There are too many racists in America. When will the boomers die off? White people suck. They don't care about women. Blame the progressives. Why are there so many morons in America? Many liberals are already despondent and coping with the loss in the saddest ways possible, including debates on who gets to take credit for certain last-minute actions, like the Gaza ceasefire, the TikTok ban, and subsequent unban, doom-posting every news article about Donald Trump, and gatekeeping jokes about the president. Others are performing token acts of #resistance by vowing not to buy a Tesla, even though many who say this already own one, or refusing to post Facebook or Twitter links on Reddit. This isn't to downplay the dangers of Trump and creeping fascism. After the tragic DC plane crash, Trump infamously blamed DEI, even after dismissing FAA and TSA officials and allowing buyouts of federal employees. He's launching ICE raids across the country and will begin housing detainees at the infamous Guantanamo Bay. There are even plans to dismantle the Department of Education. Essentially, this is a coup to destroy the government and all institutions that serve the public good. Trump effectively portrayed a vision of a declining America, one rampant with crime, illegal immigrants, lost jobs, and shuttered work sites. He promised to usher in a golden age of prosperity through tariffs and fair trade, the return of jobs, law and order, and outcompeting China and other countries. His solutions and rhetoric, especially in his inaugural address, were deeply authoritarian and fascistic, but they spoke to the anxieties of many Americans, offering an easy and simplistic cure to their woes. Democratic rhetoric was largely the same as 2016. Trump is the most dangerous candidate America's ever seen. We're here to protect our immigrant population. We're here to protect LGBTQ rights. We're here to fight for a woman's right to choose. I was probably one of the very few who doubted the strategic benefit of Biden dropping out of the 2024 race. Biden's health had clearly been a cause for concern, going as far back to at least 2020. Although back then, the progressives were slandered as ableists for pointing this out. It was a strategic mistake for Joe Biden to drop out so late, or to even run again given his declining faculties. He dropped out in late July, giving Vice President Kamala Harris only several months to campaign. It's reasonable to believe that most, if not all, Americans know who the current president is, but probably not everyone knows the vice president. Elections generally favor the incumbent. They're a safe default due to name recognition. What I think is notable, and what most people forget, is that Kamala Harris was one of the biggest names in the 2020 Democratic primaries, and she dropped out way before voting even began. She was widely unpopular, according to polls, compared to her running mates. She was criticized for flip-flopping on positions, and reports surfaced of the turmoil and dysfunction within her campaign team. Her unpopularity, late entry into the presidential race, and uninspiring messaging all contributed to her defeat in 2024. I also thought it was funny that we didn't have a Democratic primary. Obviously, no one from the Democratic Party would have challenged Biden, because that would have just been politically inconvenient, that would have been political suicide. But it was just interesting that we basically had no Democratic choice in who we wanted to succeed Joe. Essentially, Kamala Harris fell upwards. She dropped out super early in 2020, became the vice president, and then she became the presidential candidate. Now, personally, I think Biden should have stayed in the race. Yes, I know his mental faculties aren't all there. That doesn't mean that, I think he would have won, but given the reasons I outlined above, he might have fared better than Kamala. At the end of the day, what's done is done. So I don't want to dwell on hypotheticals. I think what ultimately did him in was the loss or threat of losing big donor money, and the threat, or I should say the rift, between those who wanted him to drop out versus those who wanted him to hold his ground. Now, switching gears, poor communication is being cited as the main cause of Kamala's defeat. The hosts of Pod Save America, the liberal podcast run by former Obama staffers, went on MSNBC and argued that Democrats are not connecting with people. Quote, "If we want to be a party that can win elections, we have to be a party people want to attend. And you see Trump rally, and people are having a good time at that event, and Trump is mixing it up. And you talked about how do we take on misinformation. How about a Democrat that's doing 2-hour press conferences, that's going everywhere, that can mix it up with everyone, that can go on Joe Rogan? That seems like a good hang," said one of the guests. They urged Democrats to be more personable, fun, and less robotic, writing their own social media posts, going on podcasts, and talking like normal people. In essence, the issue is cultural. The Democrats are losing because they are not connecting with the cultural aspects of average, ordinary Americans. Now, this is somewhat true. I think most of us want a candidate who is relatable and not a robot. And if that person's relatable, it could make it easier for them to, understand the issues that you and I are encountering and develop appropriate solutions. However, if the issue is cultural, then there's no reason to change course on policy and what you're advocating for. That's the big issue I see. You don't need to advocate for a higher minimum wage, Medicare for all, regulating the banks, taxing the rich, and other progressive ideas. Communicating better just means changing up the window dressing or tweaking your PR strategy rather than what you will do for the average person. It didn't feel like Democrats stood for anything other than jerking off to Israel and screaming, "Trump bad, we're not Trump." Secondly, it reduces the state of being a worker, having to earn a wage and labor for an employer 40 plus hours a week, into culture. He is a worker because he drinks Pabst Blue Ribbon, watches NFL football, drives a Ford or Chevrolet pickup truck, and says the occasional F word. The only possible strategy for the Democrats is to appeal to the think tank manufactured version of the American worker. Maybe have Kamala smoke some cigarettes and shotgun a Coors Light. Maybe get Kamala to play some pickup basketball at the local YMCA. We already tried Brat Summer, didn't we? Chapo Trap House podcast founder Will Menaker echoed the same sentiment about Democrats focusing on the issue of communication rather than developing an appealing platform for their base. Speaking on the Joshua Citarella podcast, Menaker used the example of Hassan Piker, a popular communist Twitch streamer. The Democratic Party wishes they could have someone like Hassan as their torchbearer, someone who could have their politics, but with the reach, humor, and popularity as Hassan. But Hassan wouldn't be Hassan without his politics. And that's the big issue with the Democratic Party. They are 100% against any substantive reforms or measures that would upset the business class, or their donors. This was very clear in the 2016 Democratic primary, when Democratic insiders, corporate leaders, and major news networks went on an all-out offensive against Bernie Sanders' social democratic agenda. If the Democratic Party is in fact to become a champion of working people, it will require the DNC chair and the state party chairs to adopt as a priority the curbing of outside dark money, writes Robert Borisage of The Nation. The recent actions by the party and commentary have made it clear that the Democratic Party intends to continue serving big business and big donors. Ken Martin, the longtime Minnesota Party chair, was recently elected as DNC chair without the support of big donors and Democratic lawmakers like Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, and Chuck Schumer. While this might seem promising, Martin also said at a DNC candidate forum, quote, "There are a lot of good billionaires out there that have been with Democrats who share our values, and we will take their money. But we're not taking money from those bad billionaires," end quote. In short, nothing will change. If you need proof of good billionaires versus bad billionaires, well, they're actually all the same. Just look at the infamous photo of Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Sundar Pichai cozying up at Trump's inauguration. In a repeat of 2016, calls to purge the Democratic Party of left or progressive elements re-emerged. Jamie Metzel, a former Biden staffer, urged Democrats to shed any signs of progressivism. He said on Fox, quote, "Number 2 is the Democrats didn't disconnect ourselves from these lunatics on the far left. Americans are really sensible, centrist people. Nobody wants to defund the police. Nobody's on board with globalizing the Intifada. Nobody sees people on campuses with Hamas headbands, burning American flags, and say, 'Hey, that's us.' By trying to bring everybody into this same tent, I think we got skunks in the tent, and I think the Democrats really need to look at ourselves," end quote. Now, I'm not sure where Jamie has been the last couple years. His point about defunding the police is moot. Joe Biden confidently stated in his State of the Union address that he supports funding the police, not defunding. On the issue of Israel-Palestine, Joe Biden's administration was complicit in the genocide of Palestinians and backed Israel time and time again. Yet new polling data suggests that the issue of Israel-Palestine contributed to Kamala's loss. While it's not a guarantee that Kamala would have won if she went harder on Israel, it certainly would have helped if she took a more aggressive stance in resolving the conflict. Anecdotally, a lot of people wanted Kamala and the Democrats to have a warmer relationship with the Palestinians, or at the very least, broker a ceasefire, unlike Joe Biden, who unabashedly supported Israel. Never forget that time when Kamala responded to pro-Palestinian protesters at a rally with, quote, "You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that. Otherwise, I'm speaking," end quote. This issue was likely the breaking point for people who were looking for a reason to vote Democratic. Metzel proposed the typical vanilla cookie-cutter solutions to address the party's performance. He argued that Democrats must be more clear in their messaging to earn the trust of the American people, and to run candidates who can bring people together in divided times. Gee, I haven't heard that one before. Any progressive or left program is politically and ideologically off limits for many in the Democratic Party. So instead of appealing to those elements of the American electorate, the party often pivots to the right in an attempt to capture voter blocs that supposedly exist. The moderate suburban Republican. Republicans who can't stand the vulgarity of Trump. Pro-abortion Republican women, etc., etc. He also makes it very clear in what he believes and what he thinks the party should do. No pivoting to the left. Quote, Democrats didn't disconnect ourselves from these lunatics on the far left. Americans are really sensible, centrist people. End quote. Again, this is the same old left bashing that occurred in 2016 and now in 2024-2025. Observers noted the drop in working class support since 2016, but people like Metzel believe it's all about messaging and reaching across the aisle, not policies that can actually help working class people. In other words, let's do everything but the things that piss off our donors and the mega-rich. Leftist and progressive commentary on this subject usually concludes with the calls for the Democratic Party to regain working class support if they are to succeed in future elections. I wholeheartedly agree with this. Yet, I think that time has passed. The last 8 years have shown that the Democratic Party will not change. What's important now is recognizing that we are witnessing an authoritarian takeover by Trump, Elon, and their cronies, enabled by the Democratic Party. It's time we acknowledge this and act accordingly.